progress.
We are going to begin a Sicha from Likkutei Aleph, Parshas Pekudei, the third Sicha in Likkutei Aleph, volume 11 of Likkutei Sichos. In discussing the pasuk, it came to pass in the first month, Bashana Hashenis, in the second year, Be'echad lachodesh, in the first of the day of the month, Hukam Mishkan, the Mishkan was erected. This means on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the year after they went out of Mitzrayim. So they went out of Mitzrayim in the year 2448, and a year later they erected the Mishkan in the Midbar, practically on Rosh Chodesh Nisan. The Medrash, quoted also by Rashi, notes that the verse uses the passive voice. Hukam Mishkan. The sanctuary was erected. It doesn't say someone erected it, that there was an action. It just happened, implying that it arose on its own accord. That was the only possibility, that it had to happen in that type of way, because no one among the entire Jewish people could erect it because of the weight of the crush and the boards. Moshe also could not erect it. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be He, told him, act with your hands. You will appear to erect it, but it will arise on its own accord. Even so, even though it will arise on its own accord, I will write in the Torah that you erected it, as it is written, Vayhi b'chodesh harishon. It was in the first month, in the second year, on the first day of the month, the sanctuary was erected. Who erected it? Moshe, as it is written, that it says Moshe erected the sanctuary. It says Vayokem Moshe as a Mishkan. So it says that Moshe was the one that erected the sanctuary. So the Rebbe says clarification is necessary. The Medrash continues, as also quoted by Rashi. As also quoted by Rashi, stating that throughout all the 7 days of the sanctuary's dedication, that began on the 23rd of Adar, today's date actually is Chav Gimel Adar, it began what's called the Yemei HaMiluyim. The training and the dedication of the Mishkan went on for 7 days until Rosh Chodesh Nisan, when it was finally began the service as a working Mishkan. So it says for those 7 days, Moshe would erect the sanctuary and take it down. If no one, not even Moshe, could erect it because of the weight of the boards, how could Moshe have erected it and dismantled it every day? Section 2, as explained at length in another source, the Rebbe talks about it in a different Sicha, the reason why Moshe erected the sanctuary on each of the 7 days of the Yemei HaMiluyim, the sanctuary's dedication, though Hashem had commanded him, on the day when the first month begins, on the first of the month, you shall erect the sanctuary of the 10th of meeting. So if Hashem told him, you shall raise up the Mishkan on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, why was he doing so already during the Yemei HaMiluyim? Why was he doing it from Chav Gimel Adar, the 7 days in training? So why he did that is the subject of a difference of opinion between Rashi and Ramban, Nachmanides. Ramban writes, Hashem initially told Moshe, meaning before the 7 days of dedication of the sanctuary, the Shivas Yemei HaMiluyim, you shall erect the sanctuary according to its statutes. It says in Parshas Truma, V'kim moisa es ha-mishkan kim mishpatoi, as you will be shown on the mountain Asher Horeisa Bahar. Since Hashem explicitly told him on the first day of Nisan, the sanctuary would be erected to stand for an ongoing period, Moshe knew that he would have to erect and dismantle it during the 7 days, during the days of dedication, during Yemei HaMiluyim. In other words, there is 2 separate commands. There is what it says, by Yom HaChodesh Harishon Be'echad HaChodesh Takim. That'll be the first day of the month of Nisan. And then there's a separate thing that he told him beforehand that you're going to have to, before the Shivas Yemei Miluim, that you have to raise up the Mishkan according to what you were shown in the mountain. So Moshe Rabbeinu understood that, or that was another separate tzivui to Moshe, telling him that he should help out and he should be the one to erect it during the Yemei Miluim. That is the opinion of the Ramban. However, on the Torah, Rashi does not interpret, in his commentary on the Torah, Rashi does not interpret the intent of the verse as referring to the erection of the sanctuary to stand for an ongoing period. Instead of explaining the verse in a manner that causes it to depart from its straightforward meaning, he understands from the phrase, on the day when the first month begins, you shall erect the sanctuary. In other words, what it says, means that not as a specific instruction that on this day the sanctuary be erected for an ongoing period, but rather as a general command to erect the sanctuary on this day. Meaning that this is not about, there's two different things that the Eibishter is telling him, oh, you're going to have to erect it by the times of the training, and then you're going to have to erect it afterwards. No, it's talking about the general command of putting up the Mishkan. According to this interpretation of Rashi, the command on the date when the first month begins, you shall erect the sanctuary, is not an additional charge apart from the command that you should be vakimoisa, you shall erect the sanctuary according to the statutes, as Ramban explains that there's two separate sivuyim, two separate commands from Hashem, but rather it reveals and clarifies the intent of the initial command, that it should be fulfilled on the day when the first month begins, on the first of the month. In other words, these are the same tzivui, except that when Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu in our parsha that on the first day of the month of Nisan, the second year, you will, or the Mishkan will be raised up, that's a continuation and a further elaboration on what he said in Parshas Teruma, that you will raise it up like at the mountain. Although Moshe erected the sanctuary before Rosh Chodesh Nisan, he was not commanded to do so according to Rashi's understanding, because the only tzivui of Hashem was concerning the first of the month of Nisan. Instead, he concluded that he should do so from the fact that he was commanded to train Aaron and his sons in preparation for their sacrificial service, the avodah of karbonos. This training, the Yemei Miluyim, had to be carried out in the place where that avodah service would be performed in an ongoing manner, meaning the Mishkan. In other words, there had to be a Mishkan in which to train Aaron and his children. Specifically, Moshe came to that conclusion based on the explicit command that Aaron and his sons should be al Pesach Oil Moyed, at the entrance to the tent of meeting throughout the 7 days of the dedication. So if they were supposed to be al Pesach Oil Moyed at the entrance, so there had to be a tent of meeting, there had to be an Oil Moed. Moshe knew that he had to erect the sanctuary during those days. So this was something that Moshe Rabbeinu understood on his own, to put up the Mishkan during those 7 days of the Miluyim, the 7 days of training. Based on the above, taking in consideration Rashi's statement quoted above, that neither Moshe nor anyone else could erect the sanctuary on their own, and divine assistance was necessary, a difficulty arises, according to Ramban, who maintains that there was a special tzivui, a divine command to erect the sanctuary during the 7 days of dedication. It is possible to say, though it could be said that this resolution is somewhat forced, it's a little bit bedoichik, that Moshe was empowered from above to erect it, and this was also implied by the statement that the sanctuary arose on its own accord. In other words, just like the tzivui that it says, the command that it says concerning the first of Nisan, where it would stand already as a functioning Mishkan, Moshe Rabbeinu would have the capability given to him to erect it from Hashem. But it's in a similar vein, since he had a command from Hashem to erect it in the 7 days of the Miluyim, a separate command, like we said, according to the Ramban, so he also would have divine assistance. Again, it's not that clear that this is so. The Rebbe says in the Ramban, it's a doichetic way of explaining it. However, according to Rashi's understanding, that there was no command to erect the sanctuary during the 7 days of dedication. From where did Moshe derive the strength to erect the sanctuary despite the weight of the boards during these days, the 7 days of the Miluyim? And it seems, again, it's like one of those things that Rashi doesn't deal with, that to explain how all of a sudden, after 7 days of picking them up, no question, no problem, comes the day of building the Mishkan, not actually putting the Mishkan at the service. Rish Chodesh Nisan, wow, here we have something special. Here we have something unique. Moshe Rabbeinu couldn't do it. Hashem had to do it for him. Section 3, to explain the superior dimension of Rish Chodesh Nisan, the 8th day of the Yemei HaMiluyim, was that on that day, the Kvoid Hashem Molei Es Kolam Es HaMishkan. The glory of Hashem filled the sanctuary, for the Shekhinah, the divine presence, rested within it. By contrast, during the 7 days of dedication, the divine presence did not rest within it. According to Rashi's understanding, it is clear why the divine presence did not rest in the sanctuary during the 7 days of dedication. The Shekhinah was not there. True, the Jews were commanded, they shall make a sanctuary for me and I will dwell amongst them, meaning that an indwelling of the Shekhinah, the divine presence, was dependent solely on building and erecting the Mishkan, the sanctuary. Nevertheless, erecting the sanctuary during the 7 days of dedication was necessary as an element of the training of Aaron and his sons, were required to undergo, was not carried out for the sake of erecting the sanctuary in and of itself. So therefore, according to Rashi, it's obviously understood that the Hashras Hashchina, the divine presence coming down into the Mishkan, did not happen during the 7 days from the 23rd of Adar until before Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Similar concepts apply even according to Ramban's understanding, that Moshe also erected the sanctuary during the 7 days of dedication, because Hashem initially told Moshe, you shall erect the sanctuary according to its statutes that you will be shown on the mountain. The pasuk in Parshas Terumah, that it says, Vakim Moshe hamishkan ki mishpatei asher hareisa bahar. So nevertheless, the Ramban explains the reason why the Mishkan was to be erected during the 7 days of dedication, even though it was a tzivui of Hashem, but it was not a tzivui as part of Asali Migdash Shechanti B'Tzoichem. It was not for the sake of making, at that time, during the 7 days of dedication, the indwelling of the Shekhinah, but rather perhaps that was necessary to train the Levites in its task, meaning erecting it at that time was a detail in the training of the Levites for their future service and was not performed for the sake of the sanctuary itself. So therefore, it was not yet a place that had the Shekhinah rest over there. Another way of looking at it is, alternatively, the intent was to coronate that day, Rosh Chodesh Nisan, with this crown. That Rosh Chodesh Nisan would have the special quality of the Shekhinah coming down, which even though there were 7 days beforehand that it was erected, the Shekhinah didn't come down. On Rosh Chodesh Nisan, it was one of the highlights of that day was that the Shekhinah came down, meaning that Rosh Chodesh Nisan would be distinguished by the fact that on it the sanctuary would be erected for an ongoing period. Thus, the difference between the erection of the sanctuary during the 7 days of dedication and its erection on the 8th day is similar to the difference between the sanctuary, which was a temporary dwelling, and the Beis HaMikdash, which was Hashem's permanent dwelling, as it says in different places. This is explained. Therefore, the Shekhinah did not rest within the sanctuary until the 8th day, because that was the time that was meant to be the special crown that was taken for that time. So he says in section 4, the unique distinction of the 8th day and its superiority over the previous 7 days of dedication is expressed in several exceptional aspects associated with that day. As Rashi, basing himself on our Chazal, our sages' statements, comments, that Rashi says as follows: the sanctuary was erected on that very day of Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and that day took 10 crowns, meaning there were 10 special things associated with that day. As is self-evident, there had to be a difference in the manner in which the sanctuary was erected on that day when compared to its previous erection, because then if one of the crowns and the specialness of the erection of the sanctuary was it was a day that 10 crowns were taken, if it's identical to what happened in the 7 days beforehand, you can't say, the very day of that the Mishkan was erected, that was a special day, it took 10 crowns. What do you mean? It's already the 8th time that it happened. Obviously, that 8th day was a completely different type of putting up of the Mishkan. As an introduction, the Rebbe goes on, as is well known, even at that time, many buildings had been erected with large stones, beginning with the building of the Tower of Babel, the city and a tower whose head would reach to the heavens, like the Pasuk says. This was not considered at all out of the ordinary, because it was accomplished by many people working together. However, in the present instance, with putting up the Mishkan, there was a unique requirement as indicated by Rashi's words. No human being, Shum Adam, could erect it because of the heaviness of the boards to crush him, and no human being was strong enough to lift them. Only Moshe was able to erect it. Moreover, even Moshe only appeared to be erecting it. So the Rebbe says Rashi's wording is precise. By saying no human being, he implies not that no amount of human beings could erect it. No, it means he implies no single person, meaning on the 8th day, the Mishkan had to be erected by one person alone, Moshe. By contrast, during the 7 days of dedication, the Yeshivas Yimei HaMiluyim, the sanctuary was erected by many people together. That wasn't a problem, because it wasn't about a special building of the Mishkan. It was only to be there to help in the training of Aaron and his children. True, we do not find an explicit tzivui, command, that the first time the Mishkan was erected in a permanent manner had to be erected by only one person. So why are you going to go ahead and say and make a whole problem and say Moshe Rabbeinu needed to be helped because he couldn't do it alone? Why would Moshe Rabbeinu do it alone? It doesn't say anywhere in the Torah that Moshe Rabbeinu had to do it alone. So the Rebbe says, even though it doesn't say it explicitly, however, often we know about mitzvahs, divine commands, only from the fact that this was the way the action in question was actually performed. In other words, we don't see explicitly in the pasuk where it says anywhere that it had to be done that way, but from the fact that it uses an expression that was done that way, that's how we know that Moshe Rabbeinu was told to do it that way. And the Rebbe says, we find this in many things in these parshas, Truma, Tetzaveh, Kisisa, Vayachal, Pekudei, that we see that certain things were done in Vayachal, Pekudei, which don't say in Truma, Tetzaveh that Hashem was commanded to do it that way. Indeed, in these Torah readings, there are many details regarding the actual construction of the Mishkan, the sanctuary, for which no explicit command is found. Moreover, there are some instances in which the actual practice appears to contradict the command that was regarding it. One thing is that the details of how they did it isn't said earlier. A bigger problem is If you read it the way it says it earlier, it seems to be one way. You read it the way it says later, it seems to be completely a different way. As Rashi states regarding the strands that held the tzitz, the head plate that the Kohen Gadol wore. Additionally, I raise a question regarding this matter here, meaning regarding the manner in which the tzitz was actually made. For the text states earlier, for the text states the way it was made now in one way. And with regard to the tzivui, to the command, in earlier parshas, it says it a different way. So you see Rashi even comments on the fact that seemingly there are things that are done in a different way, definitely with more details supplied about how it should be done than the way it was in the original command. So therefore, even though originally it doesn't say that Moshe had to do it alone, different than the Shivas Yimei HaMiluyim, that he was helped, but when it comes to this, we derive it from the fact that that's the way it was done, so he must have been commanded to do so. Moreover, it can be said that there was a specific command for the Mishkan, the sanctuary, to be erected initially by one person. As it is written, we could find a source in the Torah for this. It says, you, the singular form is used, shall erect the sanctuary according to its statutes, as you, meaning Moshe alone, will be shown on the mountain. It says, V'akimoisa, you, Moshe Rabbeinu, will erect the Mishkan, ki mishpotoi asher her'esa, like you, Moshe was shown on the mountain. No one else was shown on the mountain. Moshe himself was shown on the mountain. And you yourself were the one that had to put it up. As explained above, according to Rashi, that verse applies to the erection of the Mishkan on Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Not like the Ramban that applied that verse concerning to the Shivas Yimei HaMiluyim. So therefore, that pasuk, at least according to Rashi, is where Moshe was commanded to be the only one to put it up. And not only that, you can examine the words of Rashi, you can analyze the words of Rashi on that pasuk, and derive from that this even more. Indeed, it could be said that this is implied by the precise wording of Rashi in his commentary to that verse over there in Parshas Truma, where it says, Vakimoises HaMishkan. Rashi comments, for in the future, I, the singular form is used, will teach you and show you the order of its erection. It says that Hashem says, I will teach you how to put it up. The straightforward interpretation of Rashi's words are that Hashem, God as it were, would show Moshe how to erect the sanctuary by erecting it and showing him the manner in which it will be done. Hashem acts alone. Obviously, he does not need the assistance of others. So like I will show you, that's how you will do it alone as well. Rashi uses the word Seder. Rashi says, I will show you the Seder HaKamosai. Ularoischa Seder HaKamosai. What's it mean, which is translated as manner? In other words, how to put it up. Because Seder does not only imply the order in which the events took place, that Hashem was not just showing Moshe Rabbeinu what comes first and what comes next, but also the particular details of the practice. The classic example is the Seder of the Haggadah or the like. We say about Seder Haggadah, and there's other things that are called in Chazal Seder, in which instance there are many details involved that are to be followed precisely. This is self-evident that the word Seder does not just mean A and then B and then C, but Seder means the details. So Hashem is showing Moshe the details. Thus, the implication is that Moshe was to erect the sanctuary in keeping with the manner that Hashem erected it alone. Now the Rebbe is going to take this whole topic and bring it out according to Pnimius HaTorah, what he calls Yenishal Torah, that is to be found in Rashi, the wine of the Torah. And by this we'll be able to understand the deeper meaning, the deeper concept of why it had to be done beforehand, could be done with others, and afterwards Moshe Rabbeinu needed Hashem's help, and that is because at the beginning it was the avodah coming from below, what's called Yisrus Dolasata. But when the Mishkan had to be infused with Hashem's divine presence, the Shechina, that had to come from above. That couldn't be done from below. There's an insight befitting the term, the Yenishal Torah, the wine of the Torah, to be gleaned from the interpretation Rashi presents. As we know, that they say that the wine of the Torah, the inner secrets of the Torah, is to be found in Pirush Rashi and the Chumash. The comparison between Aisarusa Dolasata, an arousal from below, and Aisarusa Dolaela, an arousal from above, is well known. That when the differences between when we do something and Hashem does and brings down the revelation to us. More specifically, the Rebbe is going to go into detail over here. He's not going to elaborate. In the arousal from above, the Yisrus Dola'ela, there are two levels. An arousal from above evoked by and commensurate with an arousal from below. A Yisrus Dola'ela that comes in response to and as a result of the Yisrus Dolasata, and an arousal from above that transcends entirely the arousal from below. A Yisrus Dola'ela that's completely beyond the reach of a Yisrus Dolasata. Although the two types of arousal from above are incomparable, if it comes through our avoid or it comes as a result totally of Hashem, they share a common factor. They are both Yisrus Dola'ela. They both reveal godly light that a human being could not access on his own. This is not the place for further discussion of this matter. Okay, we are just going to put that aside. Now we're going to talk about the advantages of each one of these. When the avoida, when our service comes from below, or the service comes because of a revelation from above. Each of the two, an arousal from below, an arousal from above, possesses an advantage. The advantage of the arousal from above is that the light, the divine energy, the oir eliki, drawn down, is of a loftier nature. It's not limited on what we could reach. It's Hashem giving it to us. Hashem is unlimited. He could give us from the highest levels. The advantage of the arousal from below is that it involves the refinement of this lowly plane. That since it is coming from us, it's coming from within us, therefore, we are changing, we are transforming ourselves, we are working upon ourselves to make ourselves better and different. True, the light that is drawn down is incomparable to the light that is drawn down from Hashem, from above on Hashem's initiative, that when we do it by our work, we are doing it by our own effort, so then it can only reach what a human being can attain. It's limited by our own limitations. Nevertheless, because of the new development brought about by the Avodas Hashem divine service of a Jew on this lowly plane, in an environment replete with entities whose apparent existence contradicts godliness or likkutei, such service is uniquely cherished. The Rebbe used the term, it has a chavivus miyuchedes, to refer to a statement of Chachamim regarding appreciating something that is accomplished through striving and effort. A person desires bekav shaloi, one kab of his own, in other words, a certain measure, a unit of measurement, more than 9 kabim from another. In a similar vein, it is more special, the avoida that a yid does on his own, even though it is limited, like we said before, in what energy it can draw down from above, versus the great other, the another that he gets from above. These concepts are reflected in the difference between the erection of the sanctuary in the 7 days of the Miluyim of dedication and its erection versus its erection on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the 8th day of the dedication. During the 7 days of the Miluyim of the dedication, the Mishkan was erected no less than 7 times. Every day it was erected again and put down again. Since there was no explicit command to do this, like we were saying before, rather Moshe arrived at this conclusion by logically analyzing Hashem's words, that he needs to prepare and make a place on Oil Moed that the Levim should be able to practice and so on. Erecting it in this manner reflected the cherished quality associated with man's avodas Hashem, with something that's coming as a srus l'asata, an inspiration from down here below. Nevertheless, what did we say when a person does something on his own? It's limited in what it can draw down from above. Such efforts did not bring about a mishkan, a sanctuary, a term implying a place where Hashem dwells, vishachanti, I will dwell. Hashem did not manifest his presence within that structure because man, on his sole strength, is not able to draw down godliness into the Mishkan. Only on the 8th day, Rosh Chodesh Nisan, where it was erected in response to an explicit tzivui of Hashem, divine command, as this was revealed from above, that's like a Srus D'La'ela, did it become a sanctuary, a Mishkan, a place where the Shekhinah, the divine presence, manifested itself. Now, this is all according to Rashi, that there was no tzivui to Moshe Rabbeinu the first 7 days. He did it only logically. So there you could say it's only Srusa D'Lasata, and on the 8th day, on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, it's a Srusa D'La'ela, it's coming from above. What about according to the Ramban? The Ramban says that even concerning the first 7 days, there was a separate tzivui from Hashem, that Moshe Rabbeinu should erect the Mishkan for 7 days, prior to the time when the Mishkan will go into service. Will we have that distinction of Isrus D'Lasata versus Isrus D'La'ela versus the service from man versus the service and revelation that comes from above? So the Rebbe says in this paragraph, even according to Ramban, who maintains that there was a divine command to erect the sanctuary during the 7 days of dedication, the above concept still applies because those days involved merely training the Levites, the Leviim, mortals on this lowly plane. Alternatively, because during that time it had not yet been established that the higher plane would rest for perpetuity within this lower realm, in other words, the Shekhinah was not yet established to come down here. So therefore, it was still, even though it was by a tzivui of Hashem, it was still about the mata, it was still about the service that comes from below to above. The Rebbe says in section 6, based on the above, it is possible to understand the concept. Now, Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the Mishkan arose on its own, and no human being was able to erect it, although during the 7 days of dedication, Moshe, perhaps with the assistance of other Jews, erected the Mishkan, the sanctuary, every day. Throughout the 7 days of dedication, the erection of the sanctuary was only a preparatory step, constituting the avodas Hashem, the divine service of humanity on this lowly plane, a Srusa D'Lasata, something that's coming from below, so that afterwards, when he's done doing what he does, the Shekhinah, the divine presence, could rest within it. This preparatory step could be, and indeed had to be, achieved by a human being with his own potential. It's about the transformation of the lowly realm. However, Rosh Chodesh Nisan was a time when the sequence reflected in the verse, "They shall make a sanctuary for me, and I will dwell amongst them," v'osli migdash chanti b'soichem, was to be actualized. That was when it was going to be happening, the v'shchanti b'soichem, meaning the Jews would complete making the Mishkan, and the Shekhinah, the divine presence, would be manifest within it. That would have been impossible to achieve through mere human potential. Just on a person's own power, impossible to do that. Instead, it would have to come about and be drawn down via a Serusa D'La'ela, an arousal from above, a manifestation of godliness utterly beyond the structures of worldly existence. Although the manifestation of the Shekhinah, the divine presence, in the sanctuary, in the Mishkan, came as a result of Hashem's initiative, in order that the Mishkan, the sanctuary, would be erected on the day of Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and the Shekhinah would rest not only in the physical sanctuary, but also, as the Chazal said, within every member of the Jewish people, v'shachanti b'soicham b'soichel echad v'echad, and be internalized by all, it was necessary that they, as the recipients, meaning the beneficiaries of Hashem's dwelling within the sanctuary, be refined. The Yidden had to do their steps to make themselves ready that on the Rosh Chodesh Nisan they would be able to receive Hashem within them. This had to be accomplished through several preparatory activities performed by them, by the Jewish people, prior to the Shekhinah coming down on Rosh Chodesh Nisan. First, every member of the Jewish people had to make generous donations to the sanctuary. That's one step. Then those wise of heart, Chachmei Lev, had to labor in the actual fashioning of the elements of the Mishkan or the sanctuary. Afterwards, when the labor was completed, these elements, the tent, the vessels, the boards, the sockets, were brought to Moshe. The final preparatory step in constructing the Mishkan was performed by Moshe himself. He served as the intermediary, joining Hashem and the Jewish people, as it is said, Anochi oimed ben Hashem u'beinechem, I stood between God and you. Therefore it was he who would act with his hands and appear to erect it, because he was meant to be the joining between Hashem and the Jewish people. Through these efforts, the Mishkan, which was fashioned from the donations of the Jewish people, was completed, making it possible for Hashem's presence, the Shekhinah, to dwell amongst them, to be internalized within the Jews, to be part of the Jewish people. Nevertheless, the actual erection of the sanctuary, which brought about Hashem's indwelling amongst the Jewish people in a revealed manner, came about on its own accord. True, there were many preparatory steps that we had to do, but it had to be coming from above, as it were. It was brought about by an arousal from above, a Serusa Dola Elam, that transcended any Serusa Dola Sata arousal from below. Now the Rebbe is going to bring this idea in regards to the third Beis HaMikdash and how it would come about. Would it be built by human hands? Would it be built by Mashiach? Would it come down from above? So he says in section 7, according to the above explanation of the approach of the Medrash and Rashi, it is possible to say that they follow their established line of thinking, as expressed in Rashi's teaching. The future Beis HaMikdash that we are awaiting is already built and perfected. It will be revealed and will descend min hashamayim from heaven, as implied by the verse, Migdash Hashem kainu yedacha, the sanctuary of God established by your hands. Hashem is built the third Beis HaMikdash. According to this approach, even though there is a lofty and new dimension contributed by human service on this lowly plane, there is a certain advantage, like we said. When we are the ones that are doing the avodah, there's the advantage, a special chavivus, we said before, that the Rebbe says, when we do the avodah from our perspective. Nevertheless, it is impossible that a mishkan, a sanctuary, and an indwelling of the Shekhinah, the divine presence, be brought about human service on this lowly plane. Instead, this can be achieved only and specifically by a Serusa Dola Eila, an arousal from above that is incomparably loftier than man's service. For this reason, despite all the advantages achieved by human service during the 7 days of dedication, when the sanctuary was erected many times, its erection in a manner where the divine presence, where the Shekhinah would rest within it, came about specifically through its arising on its own accord, meaning as a result of a Serusa Dola Eila, as a result of something coming Malmailon. Therefore, just like in the Mishkan, it had to be something that was erected through Hashem. So if in the Mishkan it had to be erected by Hashem, so for sure the Beis HaMikdash that way. Following the same logic, Rashi and the Midrash maintain that also the future Beis HaMikdash will not be built by man, but rather will be revealed and descend from heavens. Based on the above, it could be said that the Rambam, Maimonides, who maintains that Mashiach will build the Beis HaMikdash, he says this in Mishnah Torah and in Sefer Halachos, is also following his established line of thought. Rashi in the Medrash is going according to their view, but the Rambam is following a certain view that he has about the Beis HaMikdash, which explains why Mashiach will be the one to build the Beis HaMikdash, as opposed to coming down complete from Yashamayim. With regard to the Mishkan and the Beis HaMikdash, he gives precedence to human service over revelation from above. By the Rambam, when it comes to the Beis HaMikdash, when it comes to the Mishkan, the main thing of the Mishkan and the Mikdash is what's coming down from above. What's coming from the person, the service of a person, the avoid of the person, versus what comes min hashamayim. This can be explained according to the conception explained elsewhere that the building of the Mishkan and the Beis HaMikdash involve two general purposes. A, that they serve as a resting place for the Shekhinah, the divine presence, as it is written, they shall make a Mishkan for me, a sanctuary for me, v'asli Mikdash, so that I will dwell amongst them. So that, v'asli Mikdash shchanti b'soichem, the purpose of the Mikdash, the purpose of the Mishkan, is a place for Hashem's Shekhinah to reside. B, another purpose that the Mishkan and the Mikdash is assigned, that man carry out service within, to do the avodah within it, which fundamentally refers to the avodas hakarbonos, the sacrificial services, and the pilgrimages, and the oila regel to the Beis HaMikdash on the three festivals, on the Shalosh Regalim, on the three Yom Tovim of Pesach, Sukkot, Shavuos, and Sukkot. According to Rambam, the fundamental purpose of Hashem's command to build the Beis HaMikdash was the latter, meaning the avodas Hashem of a human being on this plane, that a person serves Hashem in the Beis HaMikdash. Therefore, he defines the mitzvah of building the Beis HaMikdash right away at the beginning of Hilchos Beis HaBechira. He says the mitzvah is as constructing a house for Hashem, prepared for sacrifices to be offered within, prepared for karbanos, where the pilgrimage festivals, the Shalosh Regalim, are to be celebrated 3 times a year. Because in the Rambam's view, the main purpose of the Beis HaMikdash is our avodah that we're going to do in the Beis HaMikdash. The motivating rationale for Rambam's approach is that although the positive virtue of the indwelling of the divine presence of the Shekhinah that comes from above is incomparably loftier than the avodas Hashem, divine service performed by created beings. So why does he give so much importance to the purpose of the Beis HaMikdash is to avodas hakarbonos, the aliyah shalosh pam b'shalom b'regel? Seemingly, a much higher level is the revelation of the Shekhinah in the Beis HaMikdash. That service, still in all, that Rambam holds, that service of doing the avodas hakarbonos and so on, nevertheless possesses a virtue of its own. To refer to a statement of our sages quoted above, a person desires 1 kab of his own more than 9 kabim from another. Although man's service is only a kab, it is his kab, meaning it's avodas Hashem, divine service performed by a created being. This is what's valuable to Hashem, the service that a Yid does. Not so much that the Shekhinah comes down in the Beis HaMikdash. When Hashem commanded the Yidden to build the Mishkan and the Beis HaMikdash, his intent was for the sake of the avodas Hashem, the divine service of humanity that will be carried out within. In contrast to the indwelling of the Shekhinah, the divine presence that comes from above. That's the goal, that's the purpose according to the Rambam. Because Hashem wants our avodah. Therefore, according to the Rambam, even in La'asid Lavi, the ultimate future, Mashiach will build the Beis HaMikdash because it's about what man does, not about what comes from above, and therefore it has to be Mashiach will build it. So now the Rebbe brings an interesting point about the two sections over here. 8, it is understood that the Medrash and Rashi also ascribe a positive virtue to divine service, to avodas Hashem, carried out by humanity on this lowly plane, and the refinement that service brings about. They also concur with the Rambam that this is an amazing thing. For that reason, as explained above, it was necessary that every member of the Jewish people give generously to the construction of the sanctuary. And all those Chachmei Lev, wise of heart, labored to build the sanctuary. So they also felt the importance and value that the Rambam emphasizes about the avodah of the person, the Kav Shaloi. However, all that was merely preparatory, according to Rashi and the Medrash. The actual erection of the sanctuary was beyond the potential of Avodas Hashem of the Jewish people. Therefore, they brought the various elements of the sanctuary to Moshe. They just brought it. Now Moshe had to do it. Similarly, erecting the sanctuary during the 7 days of dedication, the Shivas Me'amaluyim, represented a preparatory step performed by human beings in order to make possible the indwelling, the Shechina, the divine presence that came about through Aisrusa D'La'ela, an arousal from above, on Rish Chodesh Nisan, as explained above. All the above applies provides a directive in our Avodas Hashem, how we are supposed to serve Hashem in both of these things, both what we're supposed to do and what's supposed to come from above. First and foremost, every person must carry out his Avodas Hashem, divine service, with his own power, like all of those preparatory steps that were done to the making of the Mishkan. Nevertheless, he must recognize that these efforts are merely preparatory steps, and he must bring all his achievements and service to Moshe. He can't do it by himself. He needs the Moshe Rabbeinu. Who is Moshe that this applies to us in our days? This refers to the spark of Moshe present in every Jew, and as a result to the extension of the Moshe in his generation, the sages of generation, which are all also known as Einei Eda, the eyes of the congregation. The Moshe of the generation has the potential to erect a sanctuary in the soul of every Jew by drawing down the divine presence from above, like the Moshe Rabbeinu was the one, after the Yidden brought it all together, Moshe Rabbeinu was the one that actually erected the Mishkan. That's one thing that we need to know. Conversely, when a shlichus, a mission that requires one to travel beyond his natural surroundings and busy himself with spreading Yiddishkeit and the well springs of the Baal Shem Tov's teachings, and particularly to bring them to outer peripheries, in other words, to bring them to chutzah, it is presented to a person, he's given this opportunity. He must look beyond his own horizons. By fulfilling such a mission, he erects a sanctuary in the soul of all those whom he influences. He is making a migdash. He is making vasli migdash, shechanti b'soichem, in every single person that he influences. Despite the great virtue of such activities, a person may think that given his immediate personal situation, this is not a directive that applies for him. Who am I to go ahead and make a sanctuary in every person? He may argue that he is part of a wise and understanding nation, Am Chacham V'Novin, and therefore he must conduct himself in a manner that involves contemplating every concept until he fully comprehends it and has internalized it entirely. In other words, I have to be ready for this mission. I have to be fully prepared for this mission before I bring this about. He may feel that in his present situation, the mission of spreading the well springs outward, is something that is still beyond him. He does not understand and comprehend it in an internalized manner. Accordingly, he thinks that initially he should labor in the study of Torah, and in particular the study of the Mayonis, the well springs of Chassidus. Over the course of time, when he will comprehend and internalize the concept that is necessary to be involved in spreading the well springs outward, then he will accept upon himself that mission and fulfill it in a deeply felt manner. So the Rebbe says, no, we don't wait for that internalization. In response to such an approach, a directive can be taken, a hera can be taken from the building of the sanctuary, of the Mishkan, for the avodas Hashem, the divine service of a human being on this lowly plane to stand, meaning that it reach a perfect state, one in which the Shechina will rest, within your handiwork. It is necessary to bring that service, that avodah, to the spark of Moshe in one's soul, and by doing so, to bring it to the Moshe of one's generation. If this is not done, we do not have the bittul to the Moshe Rabbeinu, even though one erects a sanctuary in his own soul. In other words, he is busy transforming himself and learning and doing everything to change himself, that service, that avodah, is incomplete. It corresponds merely to the erection of the sanctuary during the 7 days of dedication, during the Shivas Yimei Miluim, as explained above at length, that it's only our human endeavors, and therefore the Shekhinah cannot rest over there. It is only by bringing it to Moshe, meaning devoting oneself and giving oneself over to the eyes of the congregation, the Einei Ha'eda, the Moshe who exists in every generation, that the Shekhinah, the divine presence, will be able to rest within the individual's handiwork with Ma'aseh Yadav, his personal sanctuary and spiritual service. In the instance mentioned above, by carrying out the mission of spreading the wellsprings of Chassidus outward, Hafat Samayonas Chutza, a person's individual sanctuary will also be erected. Not just, I will help someone else. I will make now my own mishkan, my own internal vishochanti b'soicham happen. He will achieve a loftier and more complete level of divine service of Avodas Hashem through his own efforts in the Torah, its mitzvahs, and tefillah and davening. Because I am not doing it for myself, which is a limited thing. I'm doing it in response to the Moshe Rabbeinu. I'm doing it with the help of Moshe Rabbeinu that brings the true vishochanti b'soicham. Moreover, through the efforts of spreading the wellsprings of Chassidus outward, Hafot Samayonas Chutza, the Mar, Ka'osim Mar, the Master Mashiach will come. May it be in the immediate future.